on behalf of IEEE Education Society, we would like to, NSW chapter, we would like to extend our warm welcome to everybody present here for our workshop, a melange of industry speakers and undergraduate students. Those who are not quite familiar with the IEEE Education Society, to give you a very brief idea, I'll just read out one of the objectives of this society. It says that the IEEE Education Society is an international organization that promotes, advances and disseminates state-of-the-art scientific information and resources related to the society's field of interest and provides professional development opportunities for academic and industry professionals. Now, who do we have in our current committee? We have committee members from Macquarie University, from UTS, and from University of Wollongong. I've seen that there are a couple of registrations from UNSW. Anybody who is interested to join the committee, please, you are welcome to do that. Please talk to me later on. And what we have done in the past, we have organized events for HDR students, for casual tutors, and for women engineers. But we did not do much with the undergraduate students. And therefore, this year we thought that we should do something for the undergraduate students, and therefore we planned this activity. Now, we endeavor to bring industry speakers. We have 3 industry speakers today, and I'm really thankful to them for readily accepting our invitation. So, coming to today's program. We have 3 very interesting talks lined up today. So the first one from Mr. Pankaj Yadav, he's the Power Control Area Manager at NSW Rockwell Automation. Title of the talk, Industrial Automation and What the Future Holds for this exciting area of engineering endeavor. The next one from Nick Sahulias, I hope I got your last name correct, Managing Director, Beckhoff Automation Private Limited. Title of his talk, I'm about to graduate, what now? The third talk, David Gardner, COO, RoboHelix. What technical skills are beneficial for internship and job capabilities? So we'll have 30 minutes presentation and followed by 10 minutes question answer. And I would really encourage all the participants to be active and ask questions, because we want this session to be really interactive and something that we can all take away from here. So I'll get started. I should really thank people at the end, but just in case, I'll just do it right now. So thanks to all our speakers, all our participants, MK student branch, Khushbu Swarup and her team, Secretary of the Education Chapter, Nishad. Special thanks to Buddha for helping us throughout the organization of this event, and our other volunteers, Hindul, Nethini, Vishal, for their help. So let's get started. So I would like to introduce Mr. Pankaj Yadav, the first speaker of the day. So he's an electronic engineer with over 35 years of experience in industrial automation. After graduating from a premier technology institution in India, he joined a very large and diversified engineering company as a graduate engineer trainee. Having worked on several large industrial automation projects in various industry segments, Pankaj gained valuable knowledge in programmable logic controllers and variable speed drives, etc. over a period of 10 years. Pankaj immigrated to Australia in 1992 and since then has been working in various roles with some of the world's leading organizations in industrial automation such as Schneider Electric, General Electric, and in recent years, Rockwell Automation. Pankaj is based in Sydney. So, please invite the first speaker.
Thank you, Sudipta. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Pankaj Yadav, as Sudipta has said. I'm an electronic engineer by training and also by experience, working in the industry for a long time, mainly in the field of industrial automation. So I'm going to sort of look into my crystal ball a little bit and talk about what the future holds for industrial automation. It's very hard to predict what actually the future would be. 20 years ago, nobody knew where the mobile phone of today would be. We wouldn't have been able to predict. So it really is a little foolhardy to try to look too far into the future. But maybe in the next 10 years, the trends that will come into play, we can talk about that. And then from there on, it's really your imagination is as good as mine. So. Before I jump into that, I thought I'll talk about the industrial automation, a little bit of the history of industrial automation. So if you look at the industrial automation itself, in around 1760s in England, when the textile mills prior to 1760s were, all textiles were actually handmade. And then the textile mills started where they had these looms, whereby people could actually produce large amount of textiles quickly in the factories, in the textile factories of Liverpool and places like that. That was probably the start of what we know as industrial revolution. So that was the first time when human endeavor was automated. So that was purely a mechanical type of automation. Obviously, electricity and electrical devices came into picture much later. The next step change in automation happened in 1913, when, in 1909, Henry Ford had started his Ford company, and he had come out with this model called a car called Model T, which was the first sort of people's car. Before that, the cars used to be all luxury cars made for rich people. So in 1909, they came out with Model T. But initially, for the first 4 years, it was again hand-built. Each car was hand-built by people, sitting around the car or standing around the car and putting parts together. So he came up, Henry Ford actually came up with the idea of an assembly line, which essentially meant a moving conveyor belt of work, whereby the work moved from one station to the other, and at every station a worker stood, and he was specialized in doing a particular job, and he just did that job, and then he got the next car and he did that job, and the component moved to the next level. So that was how the assembly line came into picture. So that was the next step change, and now assembly lines are obviously used everywhere. Every manufacturing plant has that concept of assembly line. Around the 1950s, the electronics started making its entry. Now, electronics in those days, I'm sure most of you were not born. Even I was not born. So in 1950s, even I was not born. So I'm sure none of you were. Electronics of 1950s was very different. It had what we called valves and pentodes and diodes and triodes, and they were very different. They had it's difficult to explain how different they were, but that was the start of electronics. And then, of course, as you know, as time has gone by, electronics has gone into the silicon-based devices. It has become miniaturized, and it has become amazingly over the last 50-60 years. The miniaturization has been absolutely astounding. Nobody could have predicted the level of miniaturization that electronics would see. I'm wearing this Apple Watch, which is probably more powerful than the biggest computers that we would have had in probably 1960s or something like that. So, yeah. And then in the 1980s, things moved towards when the computers became more and more powerful, rather than just simple calculating devices. In the 1980s, software started making an entry, and now, as you see, it's software that rules the roost everywhere. most of the automation, of course, hardware, electronics, electrical, everything is still there, but most development and most new advances actually are software based. So software has taken over. Now automation in the 1930s, now I don't know whether a link will work, and this is not industrial automation, but I just want to give you a feel for what automation was in the 1930s. So let me see if this link works. Well, it seems to work actually. So it'll give you an idea of. Is it too loud?
Press escape. It's playing on his
Okay.
You've extended the display, you need to drag that picture onto the screen.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. So full screen. Yeah, that's all right. You play it again. You guys know Charlie Chaplin? Okay. So this is Charlie Chaplin's idea of automation in the 1930s. Yeah, start. Yeah. Might have to move back again, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, thanks. So that was just a little bit of comic relief, really. Industrial automation today. So that was historical. It wasn't even industrial, really. What does the automation scene look today? So in the automation scenario today for a manufacturing facility or a utility like a water treatment plant or a power station, essentially there are 5 levels of automation, as we call it. The first level is the level where all the devices that do some sort of work exist. Things like electric motors, valves, solenoids, push buttons, lamps, things like that. These are the devices that give inputs and outputs, give inputs and take outputs from controlling electronic devices, which are generally called PLCs, programmable logic controllers. Programmable logic controllers usually run the sort of an automation scheme or a program for a particular facility, and they direct all the work that is being done at the bottom level, at the device level. These PLCs, which are something like industrial computers, if you like, in very, very simple layman's terms, but obviously industrialized, then report back to a supervisory level of control, acquisition systems. There are also databases or historians in this particular case. Historians are large databases that store a lot of actual plant information, and this information is used for analysis and improving the plant processes, troubleshooting issues, etc. This level then talks to a higher level, which is the enterprise resource planning level, where you're getting into a level where the external market decides what sort of products your facility has to produce and how many of them they must produce. So all those production orders are usually placed from the ERP level. The ERP also coordinates with the suppliers. And then finally, we go to a level where this data is dispersed to other users that might be interested in that sort of information. So what today's enterprise is trying to achieve is that, unlike in the past, today's automation is about integrating all the various elements of a manufacturing system, a chain of supply, if you like. So you want to actually make sure that supply chain, distribution center, your customers, your own manufacturing facility, your power suppliers, water suppliers, all those people, as well as your corporate, which is where the finances are all linked in real time, and information is freely exchanged amongst these different layers of a facility. So what we term this particular integration as IT-OT convergence. You heard the term IT, obviously, which is information technology. OT is not that widely known, but OT stands for operation technology. So OT is the IT for the manufacturing layer, for your plant floor, whereas IT is information technology, the accounting and all those systems. Now what used to happen till very recently was that IT was in its own silo, and OT, the manufacturing plant, was in its own sort of ecosphere, and there was very little exchange of real-time information between the two. So there was a lot of delay, which meant that the manufacturing facilities could not be as agile. They could not react to market requirements, demands, etc. as quickly as today's facilities have to be. Today it's a global world, and if the manufacturing facilities are not able to do this as quickly as they should, then they get left behind. And somebody else who is more connected with their customer, supply chain, etc., is able to produce the same products at a lower total cost of ownership. So essentially, they win. So this convergence is pretty important, and this is where the company I work for, Rockwell Automation, and people like Cisco operate in that sphere to make sure that the IT and OT converge together. There are statistics around it which say that, I'm not going to go through a lot of detail here, but essentially what it means is that it is really imperative for today's modern facilities to actually have this proper connection of vast amounts of information, both from your manufacturing facilities as well as the systems that guide all these activities, ERP, MES, IoT, things like that. So all these things have to actually be able to be integrated into one big whole. What the connected enterprise is trying to do essentially is that if you come up with a new product, a new idea, you need to be able to take it to the market. That means you need to be able to design and then plan its production and start producing, start marketing, and start selling in a very quick time frame. Because if you take a long time in doing that, some other manufacturers in some other part of the world will beat you to it, and your brand new idea will be too late in the market. So essentially, what we call time to market, faster time to market is very important for manufacturers today. They must be able to produce and bring their markets out very quickly. While doing that, they also need to do it at a low cost, because if it's too expensive, nobody's going to buy it. So, and when we talk about cost, we don't talk about just the price of buying it. It's also the cost of maintaining that particular product. It's also the cost of servicing that particular product. That's why you hear of car manufacturers putting 7 years of servicing free, because some people would say, oh well, that car is a little bit more expensive to buy, but I don't have to worry about paying service in 7 years. So things like that. So you talk about a total cost of ownership, and that has to be as low as possible. You need to have your assets, the factory, your workers properly utilized. Nobody wants, productivity is very important. You don't want workers to be sitting and not being fully utilized, because that is not good for productivity. Your costs will go up. And at the end of the day, risk is also very important. If you're a food manufacturer, for example, you might be doing all the first three things right, but if you don't have proper quality control in your food manufacturing, and you send out a product that ends up, causing some diseases or making a few people sick, then the bad name that you get in the market is worth an untold amount of losses. So these risks have to be taken care of. So all this is today's automation, which is about being smart, being productive, and being secure, which is about safety. But where does this road lead to in the future? So let's talk about the future. So industrial automation of tomorrow. So one of the things that is happening in the very near foreseeable future is this thing called IoT, which is the Internet of Things. Internet of Things is something that allows all devices in the manufacturing sphere as well as supply chains to become smart. So you want your motors to be not just dumb devices, but actually be smart and be able to tell certain control systems as to what is wrong with them, when they need maintenance, all that sort of stuff. So all what we call things need to be connected. And this Internet of Things we have Internet today which connects humans, but now we are talking about an Internet where devices are connected to each other. And we are talking about very, very large numbers of devices here. The world has got only 11 billion people, not all of whom are connected on the Internet. Let's say even half of them are, even if half of them are, it's only about 5 billion people. But the Internet of Things is supposed to have something like 75 billion devices connected to each other. That means your phone's connected to mine and all that sort of stuff, but also machines connected to each other. So that's the connectivity we are talking about. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. What I'll do is I'll sort of go through all this quickly and leave about 5-10 minutes for questions. So if anybody has any questions, we can discuss that particular issue in more detail. This Internet of Things is considered to be the next big industrial revolution. It's huge. Some of the estimates are that this is the value of the Internet of Things is worth $14 trillion. It's difficult to imagine what that amount is. But that again is broken up into various other bits and pieces: retail, trade, finance, insurance, which we're not going to talk about here. We're talking about industrial automation. Industrial automation applies to manufacturing. So manufacturing is 27% of this 14 trillion, which is 3.8 trillion of enterprise value. So it's a massive opportunity for the world to work on. And this is what you guys are going to step into as old fogies like me move out. You guys are going to move into that space. So industrial, now Internet of Things is worth 14 trillion, but the industrial Internet of Things, which is related to the manufacturing side of things, is 3.8 trillion, as we say. What that attempts to do is that from each device, from your humble AC motor, you want AC motor to be able to do smart things like, as I said, inform a controlling system what's wrong with it, so that something can come and correct it. It requires devices which can control these devices in a mobile way. In the old days, there used to be in manufacturing plants control rooms where operators would sit and control the whole plant. Nowadays, you can't actually afford that. People are moving around. They need to be able to control equipment from their phones, from iPads and things like that. So you need mobility. You need large amount of computing resources, and obviously a large amount of storing space. So scalable computing, cloud comes into picture. We are collecting a lot of data from these. All these smart devices are sending a hell of a lot of data, and it's absolutely humanly impossible for us to analyze that data. So obviously that data analysis itself becomes a science in itself, and therefore data analytics is a very important aspect of the future of automation. And lastly, all this has to be secure. You don't want people to be hacking into this and poisoning your water supply from city water, things like that. So that is the challenge of the industrial Internet of Things. So in order for this to work, along with the IT networks that we are familiar with, we also need to have stable and strong what we call OT networks, which is the operational technology networks. And we need to be ready to handle this huge avalanche of data that is going to come to us with these 75 billion devices talking to each other. So that's why you need some massive, smart, analytical tools, which is where big data. What happened? Somebody said something?
You triggered your phone, it's fine.
Oh yes, I did. And now I brought my phone to me. That's too smart for my own good.
Smart.
Yeah. So we need big data readiness. And what you will see in the near future is that the IT and OT worlds, as I said, are converging more and more. And there is this common space where they share the IT and OT side of things, share the strategy, the architecture, which is nowadays based on Ethernet. In the past, the industrial world didn't adopt Ethernet, whereas the IT world was all based on Ethernet. Now Ethernet is everywhere, even on the manufacturing layer, so it's one common platform. Security, governance, and a lot of hardware is common. So these are the areas that are common. The OT layer, of course, needs operational insights, so you can manufacture better, quicker, whereas the IT world aims to give the business owners better business insights, so they know how to run their businesses better and more profitably. All around the world, countries are putting in different sort of initiatives to take care of this modern, changing method, the way of automating and manufacturing equipment in a better and more competitive environment. So you can see different initiatives. There is Industry 4.0 in Germany. There's smart manufacturing in US and various places. Countries like India have got Make in India. China has got Made in China 2025. So these are initiatives that are being sponsored by the governments to actually make this change come about sooner than it otherwise would. So governments are getting behind it. It's a big deal. What smart manufacturing is ultimately trying to do, as I mentioned, is essentially going to improve your outcomes, both in terms of decreasing things like downtime, making your processes run smoother, and increasing profitability, increasing inventory turns, which basically means that whatever you manufactured, you are able to turn over that inventory very quickly. The more turns of inventory you have in a year, the more you have produced and actually have actually sold. So if you produced only one inventory turn, you only manufactured less goods. So decrease the new product introduction time, which we talked about. So there's a few in every area. It actually improves the processes. And as I mentioned, there are not just positives, there's also risks. Previously, one of the advantages of IT and OT being separate to each other was that the OT environment, which is the manufacturing environment, was secure because you could not get to it through internet and put all these viruses and stuff like that. So you couldn't stop a manufacturing line, you couldn't suddenly shut down an electricity grid. You couldn't actually do that. But now that the IT and OT are connected to each other, it is possible to actually, for hackers to actually go into manufacturing and utility and do some massive damage. So that's the risk. So it's not, no gain comes without risk. We must be aware of that risk and prepare ourselves for it. So IT and OT in many ways are same. But also different. The main thing is that in terms of OT, which is operations, availability is key, which means if you have a manufacturing facility, you don't want it shutting down. So it should be available to produce all the time. Whereas in IT, the biggest feature or the biggest requirement these days is around confidentiality. You do not want your data to be, lost or being used by people that you don't want it to get to. So in the near future, one of the things that we are trying to do is that a lot of the manufacturing activity is going through massive digital transformation, and this digital transformation takes place on various levels. The IIoT, which is Industrial Internet of Things, is essentially the underpinning of this, and that allows you to actually use the connected enterprise in doing what we call creating a digital twin. So what we now try to do is that any manufacturing facility is a physical thing. It's actually a physical thing. What we try to do is create a digital twin of it, which is a virtual thing. So essentially, this digital twin mimics the manufacturing facility, but in a digital world, and it collects the real-time information from the physical thing, which is your manufacturing facility, runs various if so scenarios and if then scenarios and permutations and combinations, and then orchestrates responses and then fine tunes your manufacturing facility. The advantage of doing it this way is that if something was to go wrong, if you were to try out these things in your actual plant and something didn't work properly, then you'll be risking millions of dollars of manufacturing and production and all that. But if you're doing it in your digital twin, you can fiddle around as much as you want, and then once you've got the right, what we call the golden solution, you can actually pass it back onto the real manufacturing layer. You will, as engineering students, sorry about that. A lot of people have this impression that the more automation there is, or industrial automation is in the world, it somehow takes away people's jobs, and a lot of people suffer from that. That automation, the motive of automation is to actually do the jobs that people do today by machines or computers or whatever, and essentially it would give rise to unemployment. Whereas it couldn't be further from the truth. So if you look at the graph on the left, the job openings in the US have been consistently rising for skilled people, but the actual hires have not risen. So what that shows is that, unfortunately, I couldn't get a similar graph for Australia. So but I would say that, yeah.
Is there another graph that shows wages growth?
No, that's not really my field, but this is more about just creation of jobs. But wages growth would have to follow, because what is happening is, if you look at the graph on the left, there is a gap. The gap between the availability of jobs versus the availability of people to actually fill those jobs is actually increasing. So what is happening? The blue thing is demand, and the orange thing is supply. So as demand-supply gap increases, it has to follow that the wages will grow, because there are less people and more jobs. So obviously that should lead to wage growth. And on the right-hand side, we also notice that the productivity, not the productivity, but the growth in productivity is actually surprisingly falling in recent years, which again is counterintuitive, because you would have thought with all this automation we are becoming more productive, but actually we are becoming more productive, but the growth is actually slowing down. So these are areas which are of massive opportunity to young brains like you. Go out there, there's plenty of opportunities out there, and there's plenty to do. You need to actually arrest that drop in productivity and take it in the upward direction again. So I think I'm pretty close to finishing time, so I don't intend to actually go through all of this. This is an example. I'll run through a quick example. This is an example of augmented reality. So here, a worker has got a screen that he focuses on a machine, and rather than having to read manuals and stuff like that, that particular screen actually really shows him how he must adjust that machine, or what exactly he needs to do with that machine. So it's a virtual reality or augmented reality system. These are the kind of systems that are coming into automation now. So he knows now this is what he needs to do. He needs to open this hood out, take this little piece, and then tighten that little end with a screwdriver or whatever. This is another example of augmented reality, where someone is actually wearing, as you can see, virtual reality spectacles, glasses, and then all with his hand gestures, he is able to see. And these are real examples of how manufacturing is moving on now, where the worker, by his hand gestures, is actually able to see what he needs to do to do his job properly, and essentially just guiding through. And lastly, another example of a screen that you place in front of a faulty device, and then it actually guides you step by step as to how you need to repair this particular device. So imagine if you have a device like this, you open the hood of your car, you put this in front of it, and it actually detects and tells you what's wrong with the car and how to go about repairing it. So that's what we are talking about. We're talking about the augmented reality situations that take you into that sort of scenario. So yeah, this is just a brief overview. I know it probably would have, it's not as detailed as it could be, but in half an hour, difficult to actually do much more than that. Any questions? Yeah.
I just have one comment and one question.
Yeah.
I'm Andrew Golf, but I'm a lecturer here, but I've
Andrew.
spent 30 years in industrial automation, probably about the same time as you in doing PLCs. So I would say about the issue about the wages and the wage growth and things like that, what my experience was that often when we'd automate a process, there might have been an operator there before who was doing a fairly dirty or difficult or very repetitive job, but through doing that he actually did have a lot of insights about it. So when we automated the process, you'd get that same guy there, but he was no longer doing the dirty, difficult parts of it, but he was leveraging the knowledge that it built on it. So I think that's the reason. So in the end he would get paid a little bit more because he was being more valuable to the organisation. So that was my experience. So that would just explain.
Yeah. So just on, before you go to the next step on that, how we formally do it nowadays is that we've got applications which we call BPM, which is business process management, and they are also being adopted in the industrial world. So essentially we do exactly that. We get these smart guys who've been doing the operators who've got a wealth of knowledge and experience. We take that and then we put that into flow charts essentially, and those flow charts get into these augmented reality type of devices, and the worker is able to then use all that knowledge that was gained by someone else but automated to actually show them the way. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The other quick question would be back in the 1980s when we were starting, we were very much constrained by the communications and the processing power, and that it was all, we were limited by that as to what we could do. But gradually, in the last few years, it got to the stage that the processing was very quick. We had all the Ethernet comms, and particularly with a lot of the Rockwell stuff. I could basically collect information about the process at 5 millisecond intervals, and so it actually became that we were constrained by what we could actually do with the information. I was just wondering going into the future, what you would perceive are going to be the constraints on what we can do.
Yeah, so already that, from those days, in the early days, we had initially all the communication was by what we call discrete communication. Then we moved on to what we call high-speed networks. Rockwell had a thing called DeviceNet. In fact, there was an association called Open DeviceNet Vendors Association, and similarly other vendors had their own networks, and there were these bodies that were looking after. All that is gone, because that was what was actually a bottleneck, because every manufacturer wanted to stay in their own silo and wanted to have a closed sort of a network which other people couldn't get into. That's gone. The customers have rejected it, and what has now happened is everything is on Ethernet. So for a long time, the industrial world actually, because of its vested interest, in my view, kept Ethernet away, and they kept saying it's not secure and it's not deterministic and all that kind of stuff. All that is gone because the customers have demanded, and now if you don't do Ethernet in industrial devices, nobody wants to talk to you. So Ethernet has come in. So now the future of industrial automation, communications, and all this convergence and everything is all depend upon where Ethernet goes. So we're already on Giganet Ethernet networks. So the bandwidth is huge. There's massive amount of data being, and that's why we can talk about big data and all that kind of stuff. So what is the limitation of this? It's the same limitation as the limitation of Ethernet. Do we know where the Ethernet speeds will stop? We are already at, as I said, at Giganet Ethernet, gigabit Ethernet. The speeds keep increasing. Where they will end, actually, an IT engineer or an IT network engineer will probably be able to answer it better than we can, because we actually are piggybacking on their research. I don't know if it answers your question, no. But yeah. Anybody else? Did you have something you want to know? Or?
Yeah, it's the company that I'm currently working at. I'm doing an internship with a small industrial automation firm. We're specifically told by my supervising engineers, tells us specifically not to say we're removing jobs. We are augmenting the business sphere. We have all sorts of lingo that I still haven't mastered. Basically meaning that the workers there used to be 4 workers on a line, now there's 1 worker on a line. Those 3 workers are therefore better utilized on other production lines. But in essence, we are still optimizing the workers out of the job. Once we obtain all the experience, we map it out perfectly as you mentioned. It does seem like we are removing those jobs.
So what is happening is, if you look at it, for example, some years ago, the Holden factory, or before that actually, the Ford factory in Melbourne closed down. Now there's huge automobile workers in that town, and everybody said what's going to happen to them and they're going to lose. Well, they all got retrained, and they all found different jobs. Probably most of them actually got better jobs. So what happens is, you're right, in the short term, those workers will lose their jobs, but they will, the future actually requires us to retrain ourselves again and again in functions that we can't even envisage right now. And all those functions, so essentially the worker from doing a manual job moves to the next level, and the next level, and the next level. So, and that's what has happened through history. If you look at the workforce, we've been talking about this rise in unemployment because of automation since the Industrial Revolution. But it's never happened, because people find gainful, people will get utilized in higher level jobs. They will become more creative rather than being manual. That's what is probably a philosophical answer, but essentially that is what will really happen. That is what is expected to happen. As that graph showed, that the skilled, now there is a requirement of analyzing all the data, for example. So who's going to write analytical software and all that? So somebody's got to do all that. So people will have to skill up, I suppose.
Can we stop here?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Can I ask please Professor Suhas to hand over a token gift for the speaker? And thanks very much for taking us to the
Macquarie, and you told that Internet of Things in the manufacturing sector is $3.4 billion. So our students will be better off.
Absolutely.
Because
that's
the street
absolutely
doing is currently 6 people's jobs. I guess those 6 people are not my responsibility, but I still feel guilty about it.
Yes. Who is going to do better work? Because I have one here.
That means it's 2 weeks of died.
And it's still come down.
I've got no personal plans with Jerry. It's not my job, it's my job is the last. I still have it. It's still kind of like...
Nig is the managing director of Baker Automation and has worked in the machine automation industry for over 15 years. Working with some of Australia's top manufacturers and machine builders, his experience covers factory process machine and building automation. And I would especially like to thank Nig because I heard you're based in Melbourne.
Yes.
So thanks very much for taking your time out and coming to Sydney.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
All right. My talk's going to be taking a little bit of a different spin. You're all studying engineering. I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about engineering things. But how many are graduating this year? Show of hands. A couple. All right, interactive again. Who's electrical? Really? Mechatronics? Room software? Alrighty. Anything else that I missed? Computer sciences?
Mechanical.
Arts graduates? Museum studies? Anything?
Mechanical.
Alright, so going forward, there's one thing that we've got in common, it doesn't matter what we've studied, whatever, is that we're all going to be in the workforce soon, and intergenerationally there's a lot of people out there that we have to work with. So all of these generations, actually, who's I guess we won't have any traditionalists here. Baby boomers? Anyone?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, a couple of baby boomers. Gen X? Yeah, maybe. Millennials. It's hard to relate because all these, there's no real one defined group. But anyway.
I find millennials because I've seen a bunch of different numbers.
Yeah, it's all over the place. I've tried to do some research, and the dates always change. But one thing is that we're all different ages and groups and so forth. So on this topic, on this note, I was going through the Dubai airport. I thought, let me do some research. So millennials are, and I just stopped there.
Result number 3.
Right, we've got rude, we've got selfish, we've got useless. Right, we've got, what are you killing?
Everything.
Everything. You're killing everything. So it's that one really surprised me.
Reality.
Right.
The middle class.
So millennials are killing it, maybe. So I thought maybe let's just take a real quick look at what other generations are thinking about the millennials. So they know it all, they're awful, they're lazy, they complain, they know it.
No, I'm sorry, that is wrong.
And that, I actually had to look up. I had to look up these terms. I mean, I felt really old. Right?
I have to look up those terms.
Okay. So,
I'm older than you and I know.
yeah, so I've got a couple of girls in our office, and they're using these terms with me. I took them up, so I feel really old. But what I wanted to drive home is that let's just look at some perceptions of generations, right? Here we go. So they are lazy and they are pampered. Are we talking about millennials, or is this just always been the case for old people looking down at the young? They're awful. They're narcissists. They're rude and selfish. Well, they were in the 1920s too, so it's not just you guys. They know everything and they're all right. You know, Aristotle thought the same thing 6,000 years ago. Now what have we got? So they're confident. They haven't been humbled yet. Again. Everything's beneath them, they want everything now, hasn't changed 20 years later. Spoiled and entitled, not fit for the world. Again, 200 years ago, people are still saying the same things. So, I mean, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. They're pretty funny, well, they were for me when I was researching them. But what came up was that, I was flashing back to when I was graduating, this is 93, that's when I graduated. And I can remember people saying that about me. So my parents saying to me, "You don't know how easy you've got it compared to us." And I'm saying that to people your age, trust me. Right? Who pays $19 for a smashed Avo? Well, apparently everyone did, even. So, but this is where it starts to get serious-ish. They can't communicate. Now, the reason is that we don't communicate well amongst each other. It's not just between generations, but it's also between individuals. And of course, it's always the parents' fault. So, the one thing is that I would have to say that your generation is probably working harder for less. More polite and inclusive. You guys have really been grown up to being an inclusive generation. And you tend to juggle more than other people do because you've got more distractions, you've also got to work, you've got to maybe support family members. And I think, to your credit, you've got a lot going for you as well. So, the one thing that this has taught us is that pretty much the main difference between all of us, all the generations, is just age. We're all, 20 years ago I thought the same thing you guys did. Each generation thought their struggle is worse than the other. and we all believe that, you know, again, we've had it harder than the rest. We're all self-absorbed, really. We only think about ourselves. So what this comes down to is we need to learn how to communicate better. So what do I mean by communication as a style? So we each have a unique way of communicating, and this is based on our influences, our personal influences and understanding of the world. And what I want to touch briefly on is the 4 basic styles, and you can watch TED Talks and YouTube and everything else about these particular styles. I actually encourage you, because it's actually quite amazing. So there's 4 styles. There's drivers, analyticals, amiables, and expressives. So what you might find is, yeah, sometimes somebody just frustrates you, or you don't understand where it's coming from, or it just doesn't resonate with you, right? Maybe it's a lecturer, maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a family member, it doesn't matter. But you'll find that a typical style of a driver is they like quick results. They want everything now. Why haven't you done it yet? They're independent. They don't like wasting time. Don't talk to me about personal circumstances. They're impatient and insensitive. So maybe these things you can start seeing in yourself or other people. Then we've got the analyticals. They're slower. They sit back. They think about it. You know, they know all the facts before they make a decision. They, you know, really take their time doing something. We've got expressive. They're loud, they're bold. You know, they use things like fabulous, exciting. You know, use really animated words. They interact well with each other. They're good at persuading. They tell stories more than actually talking about facts and figures. And the last one is the amiables. They're the ones who just want to get along. They want to make everyone happy. They're people pleasers. You know, they smile more. They're happier. They're slower at making decisions. So these are the 4 basic styles. So maybe you see something, maybe you don't. So let's put this into perspective. Maybe this will resonate more. We've got Homer. Doesn't like conflict. Is very unfocused, extremely unorganised. Right? Yet he can be quite sensitive. Right? He's an expressive. Woo! Yeah, it's obvious. He's expressive. Right? Marge, on the other hand, she's an introvert. Very supportive of her children, very practical, loves her husband, and takes on too much burden. Anything? Amiable, correct. Alright, so we've got Bart. He's tactless, he's insensitive, he does things that annoy people, he's very selfish. He's a driver, right? So, of course, we've got Lisa, focuses on school, is fairly selfless, and she's the one you go to for answers. Right? So she's an analytical. So I'm going to drive this home a little bit, maybe a little bit quicker. We've got Seinfeld. I was 20 years before you guys, but it's still on TV, so I'll put it in there. Right? So Kramer, if anyone's seen it, is very expressive. Right? We've got George, is a driver. That's questionable. Elaine and Jerry. So again, I ran this past some colleagues and I'm like, who's Seinberg? Who's these people? And I'm like, really? Oh, wow, I'm really out of touch. So,
oh God.
Yeah. So I was told to drive it home with something more, you know, maybe more this century. All right. So we've got Hermione. Yeah. Do we see this? Are we starting to start seeing a pattern? So again, these are just examples you can see in characters. Obviously, this is not the actors, but these are the characters portrayed in their shows. All right, lots and lots of characters. They're probably half of them are dead by now. I don't know what the last season's doing. But again, just really quickly driving these through. Right. So, and there's a point to all this, not just nice pretty pictures. So. Did the last one flash up? Must have. So we've got the original cast, and then we have a couple more characters as well. So, so basically, every scripted TV show must cover these 4 basic character styles. Otherwise, they're leaving out a quarter of the viewing public. So they have to cover these 4 basic styles. and they always embody these because of it doesn't matter what it is. Any show out there that's got more than 4 characters in their script will cover these styles. And sometimes you think, how do these people even get along with each other? They're so opposite. Well, they're put there so we can at least relate to one of them. And if we're frustrated by the other one, it's because we can't relate to them. So think about that in daily life as well. Family, circle of friends, and your workplace, most importantly. So this is where I want to drive it home, because it's the way we interact with others that if I'm over here being an analytical, but the person I have to speak to is a driver, the only way I can get them to understand me better is if we both kind of move towards the centre. We can't both be our 2 independent styles. We'll never get along. And in the workplace, we kind of have to get along. So this is really brief. What I want you to do is go through and maybe have a look at these things. There's TED Talks, there's Briggs & Myers Social Studies, there's Social Style by Wilson Learning. Just go out there and do a little bit of homework. Watch TED Talks on the bus home, I don't know, there's plenty of time. Alright, so now that we've covered the social styles that we're dealing with, I wanted to look more about practical things about actually working in the workforce. Who here has got any level of mentorship? Family friend, future boss, anything? Someone had a job?
Internship.
Any mentors at the moment? How long have you been there for?
So I've got a team lead,
Yeah.
and he usually gives me some useful advice in
Yeah.
that regard. But I don't know if that would be considered a mentorship or just he's the person telling me what to do.
Yeah, that's fine. How long have you been there?
3 months.
3 months. All right. So we'll talk about that maybe later. All right. So I think it's really important, no matter where you are in your career, that you try to find a mentor, or at least someone who can give you some guidance, sort of bouncing ideas off. I think it's great for all of us to have this with us. In order to balance this, the mentor needs to understand what your motivation is. So it's not just about finding someone that you want to get free advice from. They also need to understand where you're coming from, what your goals are. Because at the end of the day, they're giving up their time. They're going to get some personal satisfaction from this, and we're all selfish beings in that regard. We don't do anything unless there's kind of something for us, whether it's just making us feel good. But there has to be some point of familiarity. And you have to bring something. You've got to really bring something back for this person to want to do it. I mean, if it's just taking knowledge but not giving anything back, it's not going to work. Bring enthusiasm at least. So be excited about what you're doing. Commit to it. Really, just put your whole heart into it. And with regards to finding a mentor, they're really everywhere. Just being sensible and trying to find where they are. I mean, the university links to industry. I mean, the university brought 3 of us together here, and I'm sure they do this on a regular basis. So there's there's always a way of getting some level of some mentorship or connections to industry. And you guys want jobs at the end of your careers. You're not doing this just for philanthropy's sakes. You want to go out there and find a job. So get in touch with industry any way you can. There's professional associations, and I'm sure there's student associations as well to the professional ones. There's seminars, there's workshops, there's open days. Go to as many of these things. Trade shows, even go out there and try to find things that interest you out there. And of course, the LinkedIn is so powerful. It's nuts. It's probably the best thing out there, really. And one way to get noticed is to actually write poignant feedback on someone else's post. So the thing is that putting a like or a share is okay, but if you actually write something insightful back on something that somebody else posted, you're going to get noticed.
Posted on LinkedIn?
On LinkedIn, yeah. So, I'll put something on LinkedIn and I might get 3 or 30 likes depending on what it is. But if someone writes a note, I'll actually read it. Now, I won't go to look who pressed like, I don't care. But if someone wrote a message whether it's complimentary or a question or controversial, I'll go and read it. So that person is now noticed. If it's of interest to the publisher, then you might spark up a offline or a instant, what do they call it?
Instant messaging.
Instant messaging, or yeah, whatever. In a not public way. So, and the whole thing about this is trying to get an internship at the end. If you're looking to get your foot in the door, really seek out internships. Don't be afraid to ask. You'll never get anywhere if you don't ask. You know, well, anyone who's got a partner, anything, you'll know that just because you went up and spoke to the first girl or guy, it's always not always going to be successful the first time you do it. But ask. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm asking you how how can you be my mentor?
Yeah. Talk to me. Yeah. Talk to me afterwards.
What I have to do to convince you that to become my mentor?
The thing is that we have to have something in common. So if we start conversing about a particular topic, and then we spark a relationship, then we can go from there. But if you don't ask, then I'll never know who you are.
But there should not be any expectation.
Yeah.
So I guess you've written a list of ways in which to meet people who would be interested maybe in a mentor relationship.
Yeah.
Some of the time it's a little bit difficult to feel confident enough to actually ask, so presumably there would be a way to initiate a conversation with the intent of getting a mentorship, rather than just starting it about something random. Is there a place one could go to actually find people looking specifically for that mentor relationship, rather than just by chance we have an interest?
There are. I've never found them to be...
I guess that's the question.
Yeah, I've never found them to be great because as soon as someone says, I'm prepared to be a mentor, then they get flooded. And then are they going to be a really successful mentor trying to have 5 people relating to? Why I say don't be afraid to ask is that if someone contacts, I'll talk personally now. I had a gentleman contact me, actually from India. He was coming to Australia and he was looking to get into the workforce. So we started off actually building just a chat back and forth. Actually, I was trying to get rid of him. Right? But he was persistent, and I said, you know what? Good on you. Come and talk to me. He came in, we had a chat. I said, I've got nothing for you right now, but let's keep in contact. A month later, he's actually joining our intern program, and I'm going to be his mentor. So, again, it's about tenacity, not harassment. There's a difference, right? But it's about tenacity, and if you want to take a more softy approach, ask this person that you've struck up this conversation with, is there any way that he knows or they know of how to become a mentor or find a mentor, and they might offer up. It's a soft way rather than saying, would you be? And you simply say, do you know of anyone who would do it? More of a soft approach. That's the salesman of me coming out. So this comes on to how to find internships. Many companies have internships, regardless of the size. So, how big is your company?
Oh, tiny. 20 people. 20
people, great. Right. And I'm sure Rockwell has, with thousands of people, they've got. Find a company that's doing interesting things and interesting for you. Don't go work for a company that is not doing, anything that sparks joy for you. Because anything that otherwise, it's not going to be interesting to you. So whether it's IoT or whether it's 3D printing, autonomous vehicles, anything you see that is going to give you some interest in the future that you really want to give up your time to go learn about. Which brings me on to, it is exchanging your time for experience. Rarely these days you come out of university and go straight into a well-paid career. You have to either work your way up or get experience so you can step up somewhere else immediately. And generally internships are 3 months. They can go longer. It all depends on your agreement. But I think they're really worthwhile because, and I can only speak for our company, that we offer a 3-month internship, but we always know that these people are also looking for work, so we give them the availability to go interview at other businesses. We're completely free like that because we never guarantee a job. But make sure you've got some flexibility with your employer that they know that you might have to take a day off every now and then to go for interviews and so forth. Always make sure they've got a proper internship agreement in place. I discourage you from just going there and saying, and then just giving up freely your time for something that doesn't have a structured program, because you might just end up working, being someone's errand boy for lack of a better word. And again, some companies charge for training, which I think is just, don't get me started on that. But just as a warning, there's other companies out there who give you a free internship and then charge you for training, which is then counterintuitive. Bring your A game. So really use these months to really impress your potential employer. Be your best. Prove a worthy colleague, and that's again bringing in actually contributing back. Engage with as many people as you can and building up on your social styles as well. So try to learn how to interact, how each person works, how each person thinks, and then adjusting your behaviour to connect with as many people as possible. Listen to your colleagues for nuggets of gold. Maybe one of them could be your mentor. Listen to what their wants are, and see if, or their needs are, and see if you can fulfil any of them. Most importantly, ask for feedback. Ask for feedback. Just turning up and doing what you're told to do and going home just seems to your employer like you're just doing a job. If you ask for feedback, how am I doing? Have you got any advice for me? What can I do better? Really get them to think about what you're giving to this company. And with this, you're always getting ready to interview, internally or externally. So again, how to interview. How many people have done interviews, like proper grilling, 3-on-1 type interviews? Yeah. Get ready for them. They're fun. So do your homework. Find out who you're meeting with. What is their social style? What are their online presence like? Well, pretty much anyone's going to be on LinkedIn, and that's their professional image. So that's more of a social style than if you Facebook stalk them, because that's a different personality type. So what does their company do? What are their latest releases? Understand their business. There's nothing worse than you going in there and they say, so what do you know about our company? And you're just, duh, I don't know. Right? There's nothing worse. You're never going to get ahead if you don't do some research. Again, so these are all your different touch points you can do. I don't know, yeah, I put it in there. I don't know how to use it for corporate stuff. But you can really find out more about a company. Maybe it's a social media company that has this presence, I don't know. And when you do get your foot into that interview, be truthful. It's better that you don't know something rather than pretend you do. Mate, don't make your resume thicker than it needs to be. Put in the relevant information. I get at least 10 applications a week. I never look past the first page. If what I want is not on the first page, that's it. So keep that as number one. That if you're going for an engineering job, but you're currently a Coles night stocker, don't put that as your primary experience. Put something that's going to be relevant to the industry. You can always put that later on. It's great because it shows you're industrious. You're not afraid of working. But that's not the primary interest. Have it reviewed by a mentor or a family friend, anyone in the corporate world. You can get your peers to review your thesis or any other project submissions, but don't do it for your CV. And don't broadcast the same CV to every company. Tailor it. It doesn't take much to have even 5 variants of it, and making sure that you set the right one for the right type of job you're applying for. Again, tailor it for the role you want to go for. And as I said, page 1 is the only one that really gets read. HR managers get way too many applications to even look through these 5- and 6-page resumes.
Do they use the buzzword feed calculators where they just put it through and say, this person needs this word, this word, this word, this? Is that actually something people do?
I'm not sure. Well, our company doesn't use buzzword bingo. But I wouldn't be surprised if larger HR firms do, if they're getting really big volume. I'm not a HR person, so they've probably got ways of super screening someone. So, and I've got respect the interviewer, and that's not an actual respect as in showing respect to the person, but when I say respect, I mean respect their time, respect their process. Be there, make sure you allow for a flat tyre, make sure you've got 15 minutes early and just wait in the car park until it's time to go in. Dress appropriately. So, I mean, again, that's some of your homework or your reconnaissance, where if it's a very progressive, everyone's wearing jeans and $500 t-shirts, dress maybe slightly better than this, but definitely don't turn up in jeans and t-shirts for a corporate suit and tie position. So find out what that corporate culture is and then dress appropriately. Alright, so I'm going to try to tie this all together very, very quickly. So what have we learned? Millennials don't suck. Well, not more than any other generation, really. We all need to learn to communicate better with each other, and that is very much based on our own individual social styles. Find a company that you're passionate to work with. Hey, listen, start a company of your own. If you've got a good idea, entrepreneurs is really what this country needs. Go out there, and if you've got something, invest in yourself as well. Be passionate, be prepared, and be honest. Thank you. Oh, any questions?
Actually, at Macquarie, we last year started some mentorment scheme,
yep.
But it was specifically for the first year undergraduate students. But somehow this year it's missing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was a mentor for a group of students, and they of course enjoyed the time with me.
Yeah.
So 1 week, or every week, 1 hour. But somehow this year we don't see that.
Okay. It's very important to have a mentor in university, specifically based on your education. But when going to the workforce, of course, you can't rely on your lecturers anymore. You need to find someone, if possible, in a relative industry to try to do that. Any other questions?
And I guess, like you were mentioning that we might have this kind of students in the universities.
Yeah.
I think Professor was would agree with me. We do have some technical talks and all that, but I don't think we could really bring industry speakers to come and talk to the students.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's very much appreciated that it's in here and saying something. Isn't it true? Like we do have
exactly.
technical
Yeah, I mean,
seminars.
you came from industry and you have your day-to-day job is completely different.
Yeah.
But what I feel that you spend so much time preparing these slides. I mean, many things maybe you might have grabbed from internet, but still you have given so much time, and this is really, really interesting. I mean, I enjoyed a lot, from your talk. I think everybody has enjoyed it. It's really quite
And the thing is that this social style workshop that we run goes for 3 days. Trying to compress it into 10 minutes is it's quite impossible. That's why go and do some homework. It's actually pretty some powerful stuff.
There is an MS program in the university. Are you part of that or no? It is a program which connects industry and mentors. I just have received email. I think all of you may have received it. Students can apply and then connect it to the industry.
That's cool.
And then the mentor will meet 1 hour every month.
Yeah. So I'm Melbourne based, so I work
I think
with,
that's one of
I work at 3 institutes in Melbourne.
Oh,
Yeah.
because I mean, because you are based in Melbourne, that's a little bit problem, because we don't want you to travel to Sydney for anything.
Yeah.
But like our School of Engineering, we have the industrial body, so we basically people advisor from industry.
Yeah.
And I would like you to be part of that, but because you are based in Melbourne, it's not good on you.
It's a little harder, but we do have colleagues here in Sydney that I'll ask them, see if they're
Yeah,
interested.
that will be really good. I mean, because I feel that they will be similar mentality like you. Yeah, so thank you very much, Rick, and I hope to catch up with you again in July.
Yep.
With our other workshops.
This brings to our last talk by David Gardner. David is a Sydney-born mechatronics engineer and a known leader in Australian startup arena. David is COO and manager at the award-winning machine manufacturer RoboHelix and Helix Ninja. He enjoys the challenges of innovation, leading teams through efficient project management, and managing business operations on local, regional, and global scales. David also chairs the University of Wollongong Engineering Advisory Committee, MMMB discipline. So please.
I've actually just updated the video, which I think would be cool to watch. So is that a video? Is there anything on? Alright, that's awesome. Great talks by Rockwell and what was your first name, sorry?
Pankaj.
And Nick. Right, so as Sudipta mentioned, I work for RoboHelix and in fact Helix Ninja and Innovation Corp, which is a conglomerate of companies. What do? Innovation Corp was established by a friend of mine in a garage 4 years ago, and this is where we spent hours in research and design working to innovate an industry that had been stagnant for like many years, like from traditional technologies. It's about 100 years old, and so we want to push it and automate it. So the basis of my talk today is being students, what does it take, what tools are involved, and what technical capabilities are on the other side of that thing called graduation. When you look at automation, when you look at companies, when you look at the work that you perhaps might be involved in the future, what are some of the things and areas in which you're going to have to know some of the understanding, so that me telling you back to where you're second, third, fourth year perhaps, what can you do to activate yourself in some of these areas to prep yourself? So I'm going to show you a video which is on RoboHelix. So that's the robot that we built. So I'm showing you that to sort of show you the end goal. Well, we're continuing to innovate, but that's an 8-axis robot that has gone from a manual process years and years and years ago into an automated product. We have a healthy team now, which Buddha's actually one of them. Heads up our electrical area. So, if you see the companies on the screen, you would all know them, right? Put up your hand if you like. Nutella. Yeah? No? I don't either, actually. So, my sister loves it. But I love Nestle and I love sugar. So, this is just a couple of the companies, hey, in which the machine that you see touches. Okay, so what is it? What's that machine do? Well, it automates what's called a flight, or it makes a flight. Now, a flight, as you see there, comes in a variety of shapes and sizes. And with the Nutella example, you can see that it's a thin metal strip that is being welded to a pipe, and obviously it churns all the ingredients over. So it's used in mixing applications, mining, construction. So it's a global reach. And simply enough, it's made from a small blank, a small piece of metal. What I'm going to show you here is the traditional method. So, I want you to think as an engineer and as someone who spans perhaps the, what we've got mostly mechanical, some software guys, a couple of electronics, mechanical, predominantly mechanical, right? Mechatronics. When you look into the industry within Australia with the global automation of manufacturing techniques, what does it take and what are some of the processes and systems and technical capabilities that you're going to have to know when you get out into industry to take something that's manual and move it into the future? Because let me tell you, everything's going there. Whether you talk to the guys from Rockwell, you talk to the guys with Beckhoff, the struggle and really the opportunity is how to continually move the products forward that will keep up with what people are creating in their minds. And that's the challenge, because we've got a boom in ideas, we've got a boom in creative, thinking, and it's about getting the products to that place to be able to match it. So this should play. So what we did is we looked back at the math and we said, okay, the blank, which is the piece of steel, is formed into that helical shape. We did FEA studies, we did mathematical algorithms and predictive technology to basically find out that it's a lot simpler than you think. There are algorithms, but it's mathematics, right? It's defined, you can find it. You research it and you find it. And so we put all that into an 8-axis system, okay? 4 primary and 4 secondary. So what do you do when you're looking at a manual process? When you're looking at, whatever field you're in, whether it's, all the way from PCs, all the way up until, you're trying to automate a production line, or whether you're just, looking at a simple packaging machine. What's involved? What are you going to need to know as the technical aspects to be able to move your manual process to an automated process? And the first part is motion. Okay, you need motion. Right? Without that, nothing happens. So, have you heard of ball screws? All right. We're not talking about Surrey Hills. We're talking about advanced robotics, right? And you got planetary gearbox. You got a whole array of gearboxes. Okay. You got rails. You've got guides. You've got I see there that you've got oilless bearings. Okay. So you need so many different components that will be put onto a machine. Okay. How do you get to know this? Well, you would do some of your mechanical subjects, and some of those mechanical subjects will teach you the basics on forces, okay? So listen up. I know it's really, really boring, some of those subjects, but when they give you how to design a gearbox, how to work out the forces on a shaft, and the output on a shaft, take some of that in, because even though you don't have any, practical application or vision for where that might be applied in an entirety, take it in. And try and get yourself around videos like what Nick was saying was perfect. Get yourself around the applications. If it feels really, intangible for you, get yourself around videos. Get yourself around products that are already in industry to give yourself a bit of an end goal and go, that's where it's used, or that's how it's done. Okay? A lot of this stuff you'll use data sheets and you'll use selection criteria, but what you will have to know is the basics. Okay, you will have to know force diagrams. You will have to know how to calculate stresses through, products and the different forces that are involved, distributed throughout a structure. The next part is control. Okay, you've got to be able to, when you're automating something, not have it go crazy. You've got to be able to have some level of input into the product or the system that you've got in place. You see some pretty nice gear up on there. You can go speak to the man at the back for more on that. But we used very advanced systems, and the idea is to be able to integrate seamlessly you as an operator or whoever it might be on the production floor. Pretty much, you don't want them inputting that much. You want the machine doing the work for you. You want it to be the brains, okay? You want to be able to program it, let it sit there, and it does the work. That's the whole point about automation, right? Is that you put the know-how, you put the technical capabilities into the machine, and you step back away from it. So some of these things you're going to need to know is some of your programming. I understand that this covers a vast array of disciplines, but the idea is that if there's something that you're thinking, I learned some of this in my degree, then this is the sort of area in which you can apply that, okay? Within a company like ours, RoboHelix, there's a whole array of different areas, as you can see, that needs someone like yourself to come and work for us. We've got drives, we've got motors, okay? You need to know how to select motors, you need to know how to do this, and you'll do this in a team environment, but it's very important. Advanced manufacturing, okay? You need to know some of the way in which what you're designing as an engineer relates to the end product. Okay, if you don't know that, hey, you need a couple extra mil to be able to get the operator in to, adjust some bolts, it's not going to work. It's not going to be functional. You need it to be functional, like the Charlie Chaplin video that you showed. But if someone's operating the machine and they can't get the USB stick for simple sake, it's not going to work. So you need to have some sort of understanding about machining processes. About line boring, about the capabilities of tolerances, and those tolerances, how do they affect your end product? It's in a machine like ours, it's 8-axis, a millimetre out here and there, you throw the product away. It's useless. We're talking about microns that these products need to be machined to. Material treatments, okay, material treatments and processes. What material do you start with? What's some of the things that you can do to it? Do you stress relieve it? After machining it, which is what you usually have to do. Okay? Do you harden it? We use some chrome plating on ours. You can phosphate something. You can put a nickel coating on it. There's a whole lot of different things that you can do for something, for some materials, and it has a whole different function. It changes the friction on the component. It changes the way that it will react to heat. There's a lot of different things in the way that you start with material and put it through a variety of systems or treatments. Something that is really moving the industry forward is this IoT, which you've touched on a little bit, which is the innovating use of enabling technologies, right? It's fairly self-explanatory. It's enabling something, okay? You're using, we've got here predictive component design. FEA, right, is a powerful tool for working out how something's going to react to force or fluid or heat, whatever it might be. You've got really powerful tools there, and cheap, mind you. You might spend a ton of time on it, but it's really effectively quite cheap to do this rather than making a prototype, putting in a wind tunnel per se and seeing how the airfoil is going to go. You whack it on into a simulator. I've got some samples here which we'll throw around. If someone wants to do the honours and open that up, and you can go dig your hand in. So what these were actually done by a research student here at Macquarie Uni that came and worked for us for quite a while, and he did not only a research project with us, but he did an internship with us. And he used the laboratories here at the engineering faculty within his thesis project to actually work out the deformation of different steels, to work out the tensile strength of different steels. Because of the industry we work in is a global industry, there's a lot of unknown properties within some of the materials, and that relates to the force that is required for the machine, the way that the machine operates. So he also did hardness tests, for example, to work out the stresses within different segments of the forming process of the steel. So for students like yourselves, when you're thinking about research topics, when you're thinking about, what am I going to do? Do I have to take on that? Oh wow, I got right down the rung on the thesis project and look what I got analysing something. There's no practical involved and you're thinking, man, I got gypped. Come talk to companies, right? And be proactive, just like what Nick said. If you're proactive and you're enthusiastic about something and you approach them and say, hey, it's not going to be much more work for you, okay? I'm owning the project. I want some, mentorship. I want a bit of guidance, but I'm going to take this because I'm enthusiastic about it. I'm going to use the research laboratories. I'm going to try, these experiments. This is what I want to get from it. What can I provide back to you as a company, as research data and as metrics and as understanding the processes a bit more? And this is really beneficial for companies like myself, is because we get to tailor on the back of the, you guys doing research projects, and not only are you bringing it back to Macquarie Uni, but you're also fueling it back straight directly to industry. And it's a great foot in, trust me, for a job. that student actually went from us, and he's now a project lead at the manufacturing place in which we use. So once you're in the know, you get moved around, nicely moved around into a respective area. So like what Nick says, get in early. Like seriously, if you're in your second year and you haven't had a bit of an internship, I'd be saying you're starting a bit late. Get in, wherever it is, start now, get some experience, get out there, whatever it is. Cloud-based integration. The software guys out here would absolutely love this. The engineers in us are probably like, don't really want to touch that too much. But one of the best advice, two really good pieces of advice that I got was, one, get your hands dirty. Nothing can substitute actual experience, right? Nick, the guys from Rock, anyone who's looking at a CV, I tell you what, if you've got all this all this theory and you've got no experience, we need to see experience. We want to know that if you're taking that job, that you're going to lighten the load and you're going to do it well. If you have experience and you haven't got a degree, it's going to be look totally different than the flip side. We're going to go, okay, that's okay, we can work with that, how can we better assist and provide that? So get the experience. And the second one,
Cloud-based software.
I'll come back to that. So cloud-based integration, pretty much, that's the second one, is you might not need to know too much about the software, but you need to know a bit about it, okay? Don't sit in your shell, don't sit in and go, oh, I just need to know about this little portion of my pie, I'll do my work. No. Broaden the mind, go, okay, I'm not going to be a software engineer, but at least let me know about it. Let me know about the guys on the workshop floor, about what is involved with them, right? Some of the best companies out there. We just came back from overseas, and I saw this production facility, and the loop of feedback was incredible. Okay, to be able to say, hey, I've got an idea on this. They loop it back to management, and that feedback loop. If you're an engineer and you've got some open mind, perspective, and go, hey, how does this work, or how does that work? I'm not gonna work on it, but I just need to know some of the systems and processes that are around you as an engineer. It's going to make you a far better engineer in the long run. So cloud-based integration is very, very powerful. I won't touch on it too much, but basically it's able to contain everything into one space. For us, the RoboHelix is obviously the machine, and the Helix Ninja is our cloud-based software, so they integrate seamlessly within the two. You've got the cloud-based producing the blank, you've got the machine producing it into a Helix, and it feeds back to each other. So you've got pretty much, the manager can be sitting at home having a coffee, and he knows exactly what's happening on the shop floor with the machine. So it's seamless. Huge advantages for that. You've got access from anywhere, off any device, and you've also got this hub of storage and data, which is huge, because if you can make your machine or process, whatever it is in an engineer, and add sensors to it, and have, like it said, is the Internet of Things, then it becomes a powerful tool for gathering data for your company, right? And then it's just a matter of measuring that into reasonable metrics. So automation. Basically, as an engineer, I love automation. I hope that you might move one day into automation. Australia's not super strong in it, but it doesn't mean that you can't go into your company and see something and go, hey, that needs to be done better. How can I make that be done better? And as an engineer, you should really always be asking that question, is why, how can I improve? And it's the idea of taking a process, let's say it's a machine, adding it to your systems, your control, moving that motion on into processing, and then that processing into monitoring. And you've continually got that. And as you can see from this picture, a really good automation floor will actually have the man outside of that process. It's the idea around it, is moving the man outside the process. Maybe not taking his job, but you never know. So, a couple of last slides. Power punch couple of slides. Technical skills. I think all three of us have covered it, but it's work experience. Okay, internships, work experience. The more you get, the more, you just get to see your university CAD package. have a crack at it, try it out. If you haven't even been taught on it yet, grab a model. There's tons of tutorials out there with SolidWorks, with Pro Creo. I'm not sure what you're using here, whether it's Inventor, Creo. There's stacks of tutorials. So have a crack at it, and if you get an internship, ask them to get some of their models and play around with it and have a look at the way that it affects and ask questions. That was a really good point from Nick. Engineering faculty research labs. They're a bit hard to get into, I've heard, but once you have that enthusiasm and go approach them, use them for what they're worth. I'm sorry. And the other two is company visits. I mean, even if it's a day, I spent a day going to a galvanizing place. To get paid, just call them up and say, hey, I want to go. Why? Because I want to know about it. I've got that level of, what's it called when you...
hands-on experience?
Hands-on experience, but inquisitive. There we go, inquisitive. And the last one, not many people like this, but China is a huge resource for really cheap prototype machining, okay? Obviously there's, you've got to be ethical about it, but there's some fantastic machining places out there. They're about 1/10 or even more 100th as cheap as what's happening in Australia, right? We, personally, in RoboHelix, we